Welcome to the latest Evershed Sutherland Legal Insights podcast.
Hello and welcome to Pensions in a Pod, a podcast series by Evershed Sutherland that keeps you informed on topical issues within the pensions and benefits world. I'm Jeremy Goodwin, Partner and Head of Pensions, and in each episode within this series, we'll hear from speakers across our pensions and benefits team.
Welcome everyone to the July edition of Pensions in a Pod. My name's Emma King. I'm a partner in the team, and today I'm joined by my colleagues Simon Daniel and Jen Green. In this edition of the podcast, we're going to be focusing on hybrid schemes and the potential impact of the new pensions bill on that sort of scheme. Now, the term hybrid scheme covers a really broad mix of schemes, from those with separate DB and DC sections to others that are hybrid benefit structures, such as DC sections, but that they have a DB underpin. So there's quite a lot that comes within this basket of hybrid scheme. And the new pensions bill has got material changes that are going to impact these sorts of schemes across the board in different ways. So first of all, we're going to have a look at the DB aspects of the pensions bill. Now, the government plans to amend the statutory rules that must be met before surplus can be returned to an employer from an ongoing DB scheme or to sections of DB schemes, just in order to make it much more flexible. And I'm wondering how this could be used in hybrid schemes. Simon, is that something you have been giving some thought to?
We've got a few clients who are thinking about this, and really it's all around using whatever surplus there may be in the DB section of a hybrid scheme to support the employer contribution obligation into the DC section on an ongoing basis. And I'm sure we all have schemes where using surplus on an ongoing basis is problematic for various historic reasons, and the government's effectively proposing to introduce legislation which levels the playing field for schemes so that they can all access effectively a statutory facility if certain conditions are met to draw on the surplus in a DB section while the scheme is still running on. While there's still some way to go in terms of the development of that legislation and the guidance around the conditions for using surplus, it looks promising for hybrid schemes. And it is a factor in the journey planning for those schemes, particularly when employers are thinking about, and trustees are thinking about the possibility of securing DB benefits. What is the DC strategy looking like in view of the ability to use surplus potentially?
Yeah, interesting area of development, that, isn't it? And the other thing that the government is also looking at is potentially making changes to make it easier to make payments out of surplus to members.
That's right. It said that, but nothing has sort of come through yet in terms of the bill or anything more sort of built out from government as regards proposals. But really what our clients would be interested in seeing there is some relaxations on, say, the annual allowance or the other tax provisions which enable schemes to give members some augmentations on a one-off basis, as opposed to having to think about sort of baking in levels of increase or doing something even more imaginative. A bit more flexibility in the tax system would be really helpful to allow trustees and employers to just share some of the surplus rather than just using it for the employer.
Yeah, it certainly would. It can become a bit of a headache when you're trying to do something that's beneficial. So if we think about hybrid schemes in particular, Simon, what should they be doing to prepare at the moment?
I think it's that classic step of checking to see what the rules say currently. Obviously, the legislation's not there yet. It's making its way through Parliament, and there are some sticking points. So we've seen all the coverage on mandation, and that's likely to hold things up probably. Maybe some ping-ponging between Commons and Lords on that. But think about what the rules currently say for their scheme, whether there's actually anything they can do currently. I've got one scheme which is using DB surplus to fund employer contributions in DC sections. It may be possible to do it already. But then tracking it through, looking at the guidance, talking to trustees, making it part of the journey plan and strategy. Of course, the first valuation under the new funding and investment regime will be a natural trigger point for those discussions anyway. And it's a question of being ready and prepared for the way that dialogue might go.
Yeah, Good advice. So as well as the issue around surplus extraction and sharing, the other things that are set out in the pensions bill, one of them is around super funds and endgame solutions. We've also had TPR's guidance around that as well. So Jen, can I come to you? Have you got any thoughts around this particular area of development?
Yeah, so I think it's probably the first time that we've seen TPR being really clear and express in terms of what it expects of trustees who are looking to run on their pension schemes. And TPR has been really clear that it's expecting schemes to be proactive on their endgame solutions. And it's not an option for schemes who are generating a significant surplus to sit there without thinking about the long-term strategy. And TPR has actually gone as far as to say that schemes that are running on and generating a material surplus without a plan would actually indicate poor governance controls. So trustees need to be thinking really carefully about their end game strategy. For example, making an active choice to run on, if that's what they choose to do, having a policy on surplus extraction, thinking about all of the points that Simon's just mentioned. So is there anything they can be doing sort of in scheme with their DC section for hybrids, or perhaps utilising a DC master trust? We're seeing lots of sort of product development in the market in terms of DB surplus sharing products with the DC master trust. So thinking about the options available there. So for hybrid schemes in particular, the recent developments really open up the options available. So it's quite an exciting time actually to be a trustee of a hybrid scheme.
It is, isn't it? And I think, yeah, you're right. If you've got a surplus position, you can't do nothing and just let things continue. You're going to have to make some active decisions. Okay, so let's look at the DC aspects of the bill, which is probably the lion's share of the content, really. And that's where a lot of our hybrid schemes will need to focus their minds. And the extent to which the new DC requirements in the bill are going to apply will completely depend on the hybrid structure of the scheme. So AVCs may or may not come within the ambit depending on how they're held. And then we've also got guided retirement. This is a new one and a biggie. Jen, talk to us about guided retirement and hybrid schemes.
Yeah. So, as you say, we don't yet know how the guided retirement rules will apply to different hybrid scheme structures. But in terms of what they mean, if they do actually apply, they will essentially require trustees to put in place one or more default retirement income solutions for their DC members. So they can either provide the solution within their own scheme. So, for example, using a drawdown facility or another solution with their current administrator, or if certain conditions are met, so if they can demonstrate that either it wouldn't be practicable or that a better outcome for the member would be achieved, they will be able to partner with a third party for their solution. And that third party could either be a master trust or it could be an FCA regulated scheme. And the member would move into that separate pension scheme when they retire with the member's consent. So it'd be a member choice. And for hybrid schemes, I think who have sort of smaller DC sections and have focused on sort of the accumulation phase and investment options so far, this will actually require a bit of a different mindset. It's more a question of sort of benefit design and finding solutions. So it is really a different thought process, I think, to go through. Because there weren't many hybrid schemes who actually adopted the full range of flexibilities when they were introduced in 2015. So I think from that perspective, it'll be really important for trustees to be speaking to employers at an early stage, because as I said, this does feel like more of a benefit design issue, particularly if you're partnering with a third party pension scheme. I think it'll be really important to get the employers engaged sort of at an early stage when they're thinking about their options here.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. There's an awful lot of DC elements of the hybrid schemes that haven't really done anything in this space. And it does feel to me like it's a design feature as opposed to anything trustees can be pushing by themselves. So as well as guided retirement, the other another element in the bill for DC pensions is the value for money framework, and which is new. And I mean, that looks like it could involve quite a lot of work. Simon, are you seeing anyone looking at that at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen schemes that are doing the DC provision on an own trust basis, worrying a bit about that. The sort of classic examples of smaller schemes not having been looked after in the way they might have been over the years, and the nudge towards consolidation sort of impacting on certain clients a little bit. For the hybrid schemes, those DC sections tend to be more established and have more governance around them, obviously in the same trust as DB. So those more sort of historical issues are less prevalent in my experience. But VFM, it's for me, it feels like the right focus. And there are lots of providers out there who are strongly supportive of VFM because when you think about the way the market operates, the selection of a provider quite often is done with the cost of the provision being the foremost criterion, and that's how those who are supporting employers the selection process can demonstrate the value they're bringing. They can say, look, we saved you X% versus market rate or whatever it might be. But actually, a more holistic assessment is really what members need. We all know that you get what you pay for, but you can overpay. So it's finding that balance. And there are providers who achieve some really great investment returns year on year, but who are more expensive for that. And actually, the overall outcome for members is better, even though it might cost the employer and the member a little bit more to access that. VFM helps break some of that down. So yeah, it requires a lot of work, but I think it's the right objective.
Interesting. It does feel like the right thing to be focusing on, doesn't it? Okay, last but by no means least, in terms of elements in the bill, is small pots. I'm just wondering from a hybrid perspective, Jen, what do hybrid schemes need to know about this aspect?
So small pot solutions will be one of the later developments. So probably
Right.
not going to come into force until 2030. But before that point, there'll be probably lots of work to do. So for hybrid schemes, it's really those that have DC sections that are used for automatic enrolment that we think will fall within scope. So the sort of premise behind small pots is that sections that are used for auto enrolment will be required to automatically transfer small dormant pension pots that are worth less than £1,000 to an authorised small pots consolidator. And a pot will be treated as dormant if contributions haven't been paid into it for over a year and no steps have been taken by the member to confirm or change how funds are invested. I mean, we don't really know what steps mean at the moment, but hopefully we'll have some guidance on that. But members will need to be notified and given the right to opt out. And if they don't opt out, then their small pot will be sent off to the consolidator. In terms of what schemes we'll need to do in practice, I think we'll sort of be thinking of this as sort of a dashboards Mark II type project. So there'll be lots of sort of upfront data work to get small pots ready. Trustees will also have to go through a process of determining sort of matching criteria in a similar way to dashboards. But actually, I think the criteria for small pots will be probably a bit stricter, given we're actually moving money around through the small pot solution as opposed to just data. So I think at the initial phase for schemes, it will be speaking to administrators as they are with dashboards, making sure they get their relevant slots with administrators and getting that project plan in place to ensure they can comply on time when the time comes. But as I said, we don't think that'll be until about 2030. So we've got a bit of breathing space, but it's good for trustees to know that this is coming down the track.
Yeah, useful to know what's coming next. So the one thing we haven't really touched on, which I think is worth us just spending a couple of minutes on, is investments. So Simon, do you think that the government's focus on encouraging schemes to invest more in UK productive assets is going to impact this sort of hybrid scheme that we're focusing on today?
Well, I think it may do indirectly, in that because of the levelling up of the playing field in relation to the release of surplus from ongoing schemes that we mentioned earlier, that may mean that schemes run on for longer. And if they're doing that, then perhaps they may perceive some opportunity to, hesitate to use the phrase re-risk, but flex their investment strategy accordingly, and that might attract them into different sorts of asset class, which could include productive assets, which could include UK productive assets. Obviously, the government would love that to be wholly and exclusively UK productive assets, but there's a whole debate around it. So I think through those sort of series of contingencies, there could end up being more allocations, but it will depend on the time horizon of the scheme, liquidity needs, exactly what trustees and sponsors are aiming to do. But there is a possibility, and I suppose it could be that through what I think we can all foresee is the push towards more consolidation, the assets of these schemes will end up in larger arrangements, which are together investing more in that way.
Yeah, is that the case with guided retirements, of pushing that as well, do you think, Jen?
I think so. I think we'll see sort of on the DC side, a continued sort of move towards longer term investment strategies. So those sort of to and through retirement strategies, given trustees will have so much more of a focus on that decumulation phase, it makes sense to be looking holistically at the investment strategy and aligning that with the guided retirement solution. And I guess as part of that, the platforms will play a key role in facilitating that sort of to and through investment process, rather than having to kind of disinvest at retirement, reinvest. I mean, it makes sense now for us to just have that full investment journey mapped out.
Yeah, quite agree. It would make it a lot easier to navigate for everyone, won't it? So we're coming to the end of our time today. An awful lot coming up to think about for hybrid schemes. Could I ask both of you if there's one thing you want to leave our listeners with in terms of pensions schemes bill impact on a hybrid scheme, what would that be? Simon, do you want to go first?
I would say that it opens up a whole series of possibilities that you might only have thought would be accessible at the point of deconstructing your hybrid scheme. This ability to access surplus on an ongoing basis, brings into view some of the things that you might have explored if you're actually winding the thing up, and that is worth thinking about.
Yeah, chance to be more creative. Yeah, Jen?
I think probably there are so many changes coming down the track that are going to impact each and every angle in respect of a hybrid scheme. So the planning to make sure you can maximise all of the opportunities is going to be key. So not just thinking about this year's scheme calendar, but think about the next 3 to 5, all the way through to the small pot solution, to make sure that you are having the opportunity to maximise everything that's out there.
That's great. Thank you. Well, there's certainly an awful lot for those involved with hybrid schemes to be thinking about and planning for. Thank you very much for everyone for listening to this podcast episode. See you on the next one.
Thank you for listening to the latest episode in the Pensions in a Pod series. Stay tuned for our next edition, where we will provide more perspectives into the world of pensions and benefits.
Thank you for listening to the Evershed Sutherland Legal Insights podcast.